Tonight we have the privilege of hearing from Amy Bates. Amy has her master's degree in special education with an emphasis in working with children with mental health issues. She has worked at the Family Support Center of Southwestern Utah for 13 years and is currently the in-home coordinator. She also works at Utah Foster Care as their foster adopt specialist and has enjoyed her work there for the last 6 years. Amy is a great addition to our community, and we're so glad to have her tonight. Amy, are you there?
I am. Thank you so much, Natalie. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to everyone. I'm just going to pull up my screen here and share a little bit with you guys, and then we can get started. I'm very much more used to having a lot of participation in classes that I teach, so please feel free if you have any questions as we're going along, or especially in the end, to send me a chat and we can discuss any questions that you have. But the topic that I was asked to discuss tonight is navigating trauma and emotion with children. And so I'm really excited to do that. I think right now there's a lot of need for this conversation. And so I appreciate SUU Continuing Education offering the chance to have this discussion as a community. Just real quick, this is a cute picture of my kids. As Natalie said, I have had a lot of experience working with children. My experience working with children from trauma or some hard places comes from being a foster parent for over 20 years. I've adopted 8 of my children, and I have 2 biological children. So I have no thoughts that I know everything, but I have dealt with a lot of trauma. And so a lot of this research comes from personal experience, as well as classes that I've taken, books, and other presentations I've been fortunate enough to listen to. When we're talking about children's behaviors and the trauma that they have experienced, sometimes we're going to see behaviors that can be really difficult for parents. You'll see this quote right here: "The children who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways." I don't know about all of you, but especially right now, with all that is going on in our world, my kids have been asking for love in some very unloving ways. And it's been very difficult for me as a parent to remember some of the things that I've talked about, that I'm going to talk about tonight. Sometimes we'll see children's behaviors that are just, maybe don't make much sense to us. And you can see from the other picture right there that sometimes you'll see behaviors and you're just not sure where they're coming from. But if you look down there, there's a lot of reasons why we may be seeing some of these behaviors. I think right now, even more than normally, we're seeing some behaviors as a result of everything that's going on in these children's world. And so I'm going to be talking about children that have experienced trauma in their past, as well as children that are experiencing trauma currently, because I think it kind of incorporates all of us right now. Most people have experienced trauma, and if they haven't, then they're probably experiencing something right now. And so we'll be talking about both past trauma and current trauma that a child may have experienced, and what those behaviors look like from that trauma, and then, of course, how to deal with it. And that's the most important thing that we're going to be talking about today, is how, as a parent, we manage these difficult behaviors, because we all love our children and we all want to be the best parents we can be, especially those that are joining us tonight and taking their time out to do that. And so it's just a matter of looking at ways that we can best help these children while they're going through some difficult times.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, is there a certain age that trauma goes back to? Like, does it, because I know like when kids are maybe 2 or something, they may not have, you know, that good of a memory, I would assume, for that age. So is there like a certain time frame on how far back trauma can go? Do we have those statistics or that data or knowledge?
Actually, that's really fascinating. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score, that, and a lot of research says that babies in utero can remember things. Now, they might not have the actual memory of not being fed or feeling a lot of stress from their birth parents or in their mom's belly, but they're going to have that memory, and it's going to be kept inside their brain, and it actually changes the chemistry of their brain. So as far back from in utero, they're finding out that children can be affected by trauma.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. And if you want more information on that, that book, The Body Keeps Score, is excellent. It
Okay.
just talks about how trauma is stored in our body and
Right.
what we can do to kind of overcome that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Mhm.
So actually that leads into the first thing that we can do is educate ourselves about trauma. So thank you, even better question. It's so important that we read up about trauma and that we understand what is happening because of trauma. Most of us were raised to think that trauma is no big deal, or you can only experience trauma as a child or as an adult, or maybe that children are just choosing to be bad. They're ornery and they want to annoy me today. However, most children, well, all children, they're having a behavior and they're communicating. When children have experienced trauma, that's even more so the case, is they're trying to communicate with something with us. And so we need to really take the time to educate ourselves on what the trauma that the children are experiencing now is doing to them, as well as any trauma that they might have experienced in the past. Because with that, then we really can become an expert in being able to help our children deal with any trauma that they're going through. So it's important that we recognize the 4 R's of trauma-informed care. So these are kind of what all the professionals have gotten together and said, these are the things that's important to keep in mind when we're working with children from trauma. So realizing the prevalence, that means exactly what you said, is realizing when it starts affecting them, that it's affecting them, recognizing the impact of that trauma, not glossing over it, not saying, well, they were just a baby, or they didn't understand what was going on. It's absolutely having an impact. And when the primary caregiver is stressed, the child is going to feel that stress. And so we need to recognize that that impact is happening for the child. And then we need to respond appropriately. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But just that we're acknowledging, that we're validating, that we're being there for the child during their trauma is really important. And then helping them build skills so that they can deal with their trauma. None of us live in a bubble, so we're all going to have things that are difficult throughout all of our lives. And so any skills that we can give our children now will help them as they grow and mature, so that when they have additional traumas or additional difficulties as they grow, they will be able to handle those problems and in a way that will be most beneficial to them. Another thing is to turn to the specialist. So I think it's really important as we're educating ourselves that we're making sure we're checking in with other people. Therapists, schools, the government, they all have so many resources out there. There's so many books. I love to educate myself with anything I can about trauma. And so anything that you can do to reach out to others and ask for help, that's wonderful. I'm going to put a plug in here now for the Family Support Center, who's kind of supporting this presentation, as well as the SUU Community Engagement Program. They are an excellent program. They are there to help parents when children have experienced trauma. They can give out information as well as provide respite for the children, which is crucial. We're going to be talking about self-care a little bit later, and it's important that you get that self-care, and it really does take that village to raise a child. It's not something that any of us can do on our own or should try to do on our own. And so any outside sources you can get is wonderful for you to do. Another suggestion is to provide structure and routine. I would say this is one of the most important things for a child. They need to know what's going to happen next. They need to be able to count on that dinner is going to be at this time, and then count on that we're going to do, that this is what we're going to do for Christmas. So traditions that you have in your families, routines that you have in your families are very important. Now I want to say that with a caveat. It's really important that the structure and the routines and the traditions work for you and your family. We've seen a lot of those schedules come out that are all color coordinated and go by every 15 intermediate minutes. Maybe that works for some families, and if it does, go for it. Maybe that doesn't work for your family. So in no way am I suggesting that you try to implement something that's going to add more stress into your lives. However, any structure routines that you can add into your lives is incredibly important for the children. So just if you can get a bedtime routine going, and it can be as simple as, first we're going to brush our teeth, then we're going to take a bath, then we're going to read a good night story, then we're going to go to bed. Then the children will understand what they need to do and understand what's coming next. And so they won't be so worried about the next phase. Having traditions in your family is also very important. It really helps create those connections as a family and gives the children something to look forward to. I know in our family, I'm a huge April Fool's fan, probably a little bit too much, some of my children would say, but I love April Fool's, and so I make a big deal out of it. And one April Fool's, I was not feeling great, I was sick, I believe, and my kids were devastated. Like, they complain all the time that they hate my jokes, but really and truly, they look forward to them, and it makes our family what our family is. And so those connections and those routines are so important to the children. So anytime that you can add those into your daily schedule, that's a really good thing to do for children, especially those from trauma that had no control in their lives before and maybe need that extra control and extra reassurance of what's coming next. The next thing kind of goes with that is being gentle with transitions and change. So you want to let kids know what's coming next. We may have great routines in our lives, but everybody's routine is going to get messed up sometimes, and our schedules are we're going to have a doctor's appointment thrown in there that we weren't expecting, or there's going to be an emergency of some sort. So we need to let our children work with those changes, but we need to give them as much transition as possible. So a really good rule of thumb is to give them a heads up when you're asking them to change from one task to another. So perhaps maybe say, you know, in 10 minutes, we're going to start our bedtime routine. In 10 minutes, we're going to have dinner, so that they can have time for themselves to know that something else is about to change and they're going to have to make some changes. That's really important, because when children come from trauma, or if they're in this situation right now where everything's kind of in chaos and they're just not sure how things are going, any little bit of control you can give back to them is really important, because then it will make them feel a little bit more secure. And so you want to try to give those transitions and warnings as much as possible. Now, some kids won't do well with, you know, telling them 2 days in advance that we're going to change the routine. But you know your child best. So go with what works for you and your children, and because you'll know what's going to work best for them. Another thing is giving them choice. So it's always great to give children choice, because then that gives them back some control in their lives. So provide safe opportunities for them to make their own choices. I've got a dog that's stuck in my room, and I told him not to. So 2 seconds, let me get him out.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I had the door locked so no kids would come in, and the dog got locked in here with me. Okay, so back to where we were. So choice is a really powerful motivator, and so important when these kids who have not had a lot of control in their lives it gives them some routine and gives them that structure and gives them all that control back. So even if it's just as simple as, do you want the pink cup or do you want the green cup? Do you want to take a shower first, or do you want to brush your teeth first? Whatever it can be, that's simple, and make sure when you're giving this choice that you're okay with whatever choice they're going to choose. So you wouldn't say, do you want to take out the trash or play a video game? If you want them to take out the trash, then you're not going to give them the option to opt out of it. So do you want to take out the trash now, or do you want to take out the trash in 5 minutes? Those choices are really important in giving those kids back some control in their lives, and really can help them feel more safe and secure. I just love this saying, giving choices may be the single most useful tool parents have for managing life with young children. It really is almost a magical wand, at least until children are about 5. And I would say all throughout their lives. With my 17-year-old, obviously he has a lot bigger choices, but still allowing him to make those choices, allowing him to feel in control is very important to him. The next thing is it's important to help your children discover their passions, their strengths, and their interests, and build on them. And not just help your children discover them, but for you to discover them as well. Sometimes I've noticed as a parent, I get so involved in the day-to-day parenting task that I forget to take a second and just admire my children and see what wonders and beautiful things that they are and what they bring to the world. And so it's really important that as we're helping them work through this trauma, and with that trauma is probably coming some behaviors that are very difficult for us, that we're not just seeing the difficult behaviors or just seeing the trauma, but we're also seeing them. We're seeing what makes them tick, what makes them happy, what makes them smile that day. And we're not just seeing it, but maybe helping them develop it, helping them to feel confident in that the only thing in their world is not this huge trauma that they're dealing with. That's a piece of them, but there's also lots of other pieces of them that are just as valuable and just as important as spending time on. And so it's wonderful that we can talk to our children and just make them know that we're always in their corner and we're always seeing that we see all of them. We're not just seeing the negative behaviors, but we're also seeing all their positive behaviors too. I'm sure most of us have heard the 5-to-1 suggestion that you give 5 positives to every 1 negative. I think that's a really great idea for all children, especially for children that have come from trauma. So that's a great suggestion there. Making a safe place is also something that has been found to be really helpful, especially with children from trauma. And I could see this being very helpful right now. So in our home, we already have a place for children to go when they're feeling a little bit out of control. So rather than telling my children to go to timeout, we usually have them to come to time in or to go to their safe place. Sometimes when you tell children to go to timeout, that can be telling them that your emotions right now, I don't agree with or I don't like, and so you have to go someplace else. Versus time in or a safe place, that tells them that, hey, it's okay to have these feelings. All of us have these feelings. As an adult, I get upset sometimes, or I get frustrated with another person. And if someone was to come up to me and say, hey, you can't get frustrated, just go away from me until you're not frustrated anymore, that wouldn't work by any means. So it's important that we're teaching our children how to deal with these emotions, because they're going to continue to have these emotions all throughout their lives. And we want them to know that it's okay to have the emotion. What they need to work on is how they express that emotion. So having a safe place for them to go when they are feeling overwhelmed or triggered or stimulated can really help them calm down. I think as adults, most of us do that just kind of unconsciously. And it's important that we're teaching our children how to have this skill. So that's one of the skill buildings that we were talking about earlier. We can teach them that to recognize first when their body is feeling that stress. Maybe it's something's triggered them. So maybe they were in a bad car accident, and when they drive past that spot again, every time they are triggered and they have some behaviors or they feel some really big emotions. So we want to help them recognize first that they're having these big emotions and label those emotions. You could say, it looks like you're feeling scared right now. Or it looks like I see your shoulders are really tense. How are you feeling right now? Helping our children to label emotions is the first step in that process of once they can label them, then they can kind of start learning how to calm down with them and how to handle them appropriately. And so this safe spot, however you create it, would just be someplace where they can go when they're having emotions that are overwhelming to them. Whether it's a beanbag chair, whether it's just a spot in their room, maybe it's a spot in your living room, maybe have some cool down activities there. So like a stress ball or a book or two that they like. my kids really like weighted blankets. I don't know if you've had that experience, but that really helps them with their anxiety. And so we have a weighted blanket for them to use. Anything that you find is helpful to your child. Another one of my children really loves crossword puzzles. And so we've just got a bunch of crossword puzzle books for him to use when he's upset like that. And this will help the children learn about self-awareness and self-care. And then always keep in mind there's going to be good days and bad days. So what I've seen in my family with all of this new chaos that the world is in is that school will be going great. I'll feel like we have good family unity. Things are just feeling, oh, okay, we finally got this down. And then something will happen and it will just be chaos again. and I'll just be like, what's going on? I thought everything was going great. Well, sometimes it can seem like that, but these behaviors and these feelings that the children are having are still there. And so we're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days, just like adults. And it's important that we're okay with that. We recognize that everyone has good days and bad days. It doesn't mean they're regressing or they're a bad kid. It really just means that they have to deal with their feelings still. And so we want to allow space and time for them to deal with those feelings and validate those feelings when they come up. So my teenagers are really stressed right now with school and not being able to hang out with friends. And so when they express that to me, it would be very easy for me to say, oh, that's not even a real stress. You want to know what real stress is? I'll tell you. Instead, it's important for me to say, wow, that sounds really hard. It sounds like you're really frustrated. It sounds like you're really sad. It's important that I hear what they're saying, not so much that I give suggestions or ideas of how to fix it, but that I validate what they're saying to me. Those feelings are important, and we want to make sure we honor their expressions of those feelings. This is just one of my favorite sayings. There are no bad kids, just impressionable, conflicted young people wrestling with emotions and impulses, trying to communicate their feelings and needs the only way they know how. When we look at behaviors as something children are trying to communicate with us rather than something they're doing to us, then we can start to figure out how to help them with their behaviors. One of the most important things I think we can do is practice self-care. I know that I've gone to lots of classes on dealing with children from trauma or resiliency or attachment, but I think the most important thing that I do is take time out for myself, because I can't put to use any of this that we've talked about until I'm in a good place myself. And that took me a long time to learn, but it's just been a very helpful thing. So again, I'm another plug for our Family Support Center here in Cedar City. They do respite care. So you can bring your children there for up to 3 hours once a week. It's a free service that they offer, and that can give you that break that you need. It is for children 11 and under, so that's something to keep in mind. But that can really help so that you can take time out to take care of yourself. And when you're doing that, you're modeling that behavior for your children, which is also a very important thing. They need to see that it's okay for mom to take a time out, or for mom to stop and get her favorite drink, or whatever the case may be, because then that's how they'll learn themselves as they grow and mature how to deal with some of their big emotions that they have. It's okay, and it's important that we all take care of ourselves. So whether it's self-care bingo, I've even seen quarantine bingo out there too. So whatever you do to take care of yourself, I encourage you to do it daily. Taking care of children from trauma or who are experiencing trauma currently is exhausting. It just is. And if we're not at the spot where we can be calm and regulate it ourselves, then we're not going to be able to help our children. And so please make sure, most important thing I say, take time for yourselves. And then it's also important that we let our children know that we're here. It's just even that simple thing of saying, I'm here, I'm not going anyplace, I love you, in the good, bad, and the ugly, is really important for our children to know. And so no matter what your child throws at you, no matter how hard some days are, be there. And when you make a mistake, because we all do, and when you make several in one day, because we all do, give yourself some credit, give yourself a break, and recognize that that's okay. And come back and try again the next day. So everything, I just love this saying, it's from a Circle of Security. It says, everything I need to know about being a parent in 25 words or less. It says, always be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kinder. Whenever possible, follow your children's need. Whenever necessary, take charge. So those are just some things to kind of remember as you're working with your children, especially, again, children in trauma. I'm going to skip that one. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So with children with trauma, does it like initially when they're going through that trauma and you work with the children and then it kind of goes away, does it ever come back and like kind of recycle?
Absolutely. So one thing that I'll notice, I've kind of mentioned triggers before. So you could have a trigger maybe when you're driving by a spot that was, that they experienced trauma at, or maybe it was with a certain person. So maybe the children's behavior kind of eases up and they're not feeling some of that anxiety over the trauma. And then you reintroduce a person or reintroduce a place. Or another thing that can happen is anniversaries. So I have a lot of children, like I mentioned, that are adopted, and their anniversary of being removed from their parents' homes always seems to trigger them. And it can just be the time of the year. Some of them are very young, but they recognize the time of the year, and that can be very difficult for them. So absolutely. I know myself, I think I've dealt with this issue, whatever it may be, and then I have to deal with it later when I've grown or matured in a different way. So yes, it can come back up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I just specifically wanted to talk about anxiety that you might see with children right now. We've talked about some of this, but just reassure your children that they're safe. Let them talk about their worries, and not just talk, but validate those worries. I know as a parent, sometimes when they're talking to me, I may feel like, you know, their problems are not as important, but it's important that you're validating those feelings. And then share your own coping skills, limit their news exposure. I think that one's an important one for all of us, and it says that as an adult. So make sure you limit that. And then create a routine and structure. So those are just some suggestions that they have there for you. There was a question that came on too that I wanted to address. It says, what would you say to someone who says that's being too permissive? And I'm not sure where in the presentation you asked that question, but in general, I would say that you absolutely still need to have boundaries and routines, but you know what's best for your child. And so if someone questioned whether or not I was doing what's best for my child, I would very nicely explain to them that it's probably none of their business and that I know what I'm doing, what's best for my child. I think that's where it would come in, that you're asking the experts, that you're talking to other people about it. So you were saying when it's giving them the choices. So you're giving them choices that are that you're okay with. You're not giving them choices that if they chose the wrong thing, it would matter. I think it's important that children have control over things. As adults, we all like to control things. And so giving them those choices is very much, in my opinion, not very permissive. It's really helping them grow and develop in ways that they need to do. And so I would say if you're giving them choices that allow them to get out of chores or allow them to get out of schoolwork, that's when it could become a problem. But otherwise, I think it would be okay. So the question goes on. I don't know if everyone can see the chats, but it says a lot of my families I work with struggle with it because they feel like they are being walked on. I think it's just a matter of letting them know that those choices are choices that they're okay with either option. So, you know, a red or a pink cup really as a parent doesn't matter. As a parent, we have to decide what battles are important for us to fight. I know that's something I've learned over the years. I used to try to, control a lot more than I do now. I've just learned as a parent that so little of what I worried about with my first child really matters. And so I've learned to let some of those battles go. I've learned to say, you know what, if my daughter wants to wear her striped shirt with her polka dotted skirt, then let her. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to make a difference. In fact, it's going to help her with her self-esteem. And it's going to help her, let her know that I trust her to make good decisions, and I want her to know that. Is there any other questions that someone has that I can address? If you do, you can just put it in the chat and then I can see it. While we're waiting for that, if we have a couple more seconds, I'm going to go back to this slide if I can. Where did it go? Oh, there it goes. So this slide right here is one that I just love. It's one that I share with my families almost routinely because I think it's important, regardless of where our children are at, whether they're experiencing trauma currently or in their past, that we're taking a look at the most important 9 minutes of the day is what they talk about. So the first 3 minutes when they wake up, the first 3 minutes when they come home from school, and the last 3 minutes of the day before they go to bed. Those moments are times that we should make sure that we're being positive and loving towards our children. The rest of the day, you may not make it, and the rest of the day may go chaotic and crazy as some of them do. But if you can try to focus on those 9 minutes, I really think it makes a difference in your child's behavior and also the love and affection that you feel towards a child. One question that came up was, any ideas for helping children who are feeling stressed and trying to focus on schoolwork? That's a great question. I think it's really important that we are recognizing that and acknowledging and validating that this is a really hard time for children. And even if they're not dealing with the trauma currently, maybe it's a really hard time for them because of past trauma. And we need to be okay with choosing what's most important. Is it most important that they're getting an A, or is their emotional health and their well-being most important? I think schoolwork is incredibly important, and we want to encourage that. But we also need to kind of have that balance. And right now, when world is kind of in chaos, we need to recognize that our children may not be getting straight A's, and that really will be okay. And that them feeling safe and feeling that you're here for them and they're loved is really more important than the grade. So another question says, will there be a PowerPoint or way to view this later? I can send it to you. I think we're actually almost done. So I think you made it here for all of it. So I appreciate everyone that came on and made some comments, and I hope it was helpful to everyone.
Yeah, and
Yeah. Go ahead.
We will post this on our YouTube channel and on our website. I will get that information at the end of the lesson as well.
Great.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for being on and being one of our presenters today. I really appreciate what you talked about, the choices. I was thinking my youngest was feeling really stressed, and I was doing her hair, and I simply asked her what color of rubber band she wanted in her hair that day, and it was enough to help her feel happy again. So I totally agree that giving choices, whatever it is, helps kids feel happy again and feel like they're empowered to move forward in life. If we don't have any more questions, I think we're just going to end it. Are there any last questions?
No, I think that's it. I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and we truly do hope you enjoyed learning something new. You can watch the recording of this and all of our free community classes at suu.edu/. on our channel. Be Wise. We're grateful for your attendance today. Thank you, and we will see you soon.
Can you repeat that website real quickly? SUU.edu.
SUU.edu/keeplearning.
Okay, thank you.
Have a great day.